Friends of suicide victims. How did their death affect you? I'm a student, and a girl doing her PhD in my lab killed herself a little less than a week ago. She was someone who I talked to every day, asked for advice, had lunch with sometimes, all of those things that colleagues do. I liked her a lot. After the departmental email went out about with the news, there were a lot of people who seemed to make a show of how upset they were and criticized me for not being sadder. That reaction from those people was worse for me than my friend dying suddenly, really.
That's a tough situation. Losing someone you talk to regularly can hit hard. It's strange how some people react to tragedy, almost putting on a performance. It feels like their focus is more on showing emotions than genuinely processing the loss. Sometimes, the weight of those reactions can overshadow the actual grief. It's okay to feel differently. Everyone handles these things in their own way.
Complex one here. My best friend of 20 years died in a horrible car accident, not suicide. It was quite traumatic and hard on everyone. I became close with his girlfriend of 7 years and was her only real support structure. We then started secretly dating. We knew how it looked, but it was real. Fast forward 6 months, and I figure out that she has a plan to kill herself on the anniversary of his death. She knew I knew, and knew if I was there I'd stop her. So when another guy friend entered the picture, I casually suggested / asked him to drive with her to the place I knew it was going to happen. Not mentioning the suicide part, I just said it was a long drive and I didn't want her going alone. I knew she wouldn't go through with it if another person was present. I was right. We broke up shortly after and credits him for saving her life. To this day, she has no idea how much I did to change things. We're still great friends though. TLDR gave up a girl I loved to another guy to save her life.
That's a heavy situation. It sounds like you had a lot on your shoulders. Losing your friend must have been tough, and then being there for his girlfriend while developing feelings makes it complicated. Making a choice to put her well-being first, even when it meant stepping back from a relationship, shows how much you cared. It's good you both remain friends, though. That connection still holds value.
It stopped me from killing myself too. We had only just become friends and I realized how much it affected me. I was super sad and realized how much people intrinsically do care. Ever since then, anytime I have an impulse, I just remember that fact, and then I no longer feel so hollow. This will probably be buried, so unless there is interest, I won't elaborate further.
I'm glad to hear that you found a connection that helped you out. It's surprising how a new friendship can change your perspective. Sometimes, just knowing that someone cares can make a significant difference. It's important to hold on to those moments when things get tough. If you ever feel comfortable sharing more, I'm here to listen.
My friend committed suicide last year, and it was a sense of disbelief. It didn't really hit home until I was at his wake, seeing his parents cry during the slideshow, showing pictures of him throughout the years with his favorite music playing in the background. I still don't know why he did it. Doubt anyone will ever know. I used to jam with him sometimes. One of the best bass players I have ever known.
I'm sorry to hear about your loss. It's tough to process something like that, especially when it feels so sudden. The memories of jamming together probably hit harder now, given how much he meant to you. It's strange how you can be so close to someone yet feel so far when they're gone. Those moments at the wake must have felt incredibly heavy. Healing takes time.
We were 16 when my friend shot himself over a makeup to break up relationship. More than anything, I think it taught me about the selfishness of the act. It destroyed his mom. Myself and a couple guys from that group of friends still visit her every now and then. She's still a zombie. He died 16 years ago.
I'm sorry to hear about your friend. It's tough dealing with loss in such a tragic way. Seeing the impact on his mom must be really hard. It's wild how one person's action can affect so many lives. Those visits probably mean a lot to her, even if she seems distant. It's a reminder that mental health matters, and we should always check on each other.
I felt really numb, like it didn't happen, like I couldn't believe she actually did it. It took a long time to sink in. It just felt like she had went away for a while. It was hard because we had both been depressed and suicidal, and when I had become more optimistic, she had not. And I made the decision not to be close to her anymore because she was pulling me down. I don't know. Maybe if I stayed with her, it could have been different. I tried though. I tried so hard, and I was mostly angry when I found the news out. I was angry at her for not trying harder. But then I feel horrible for thinking that because I understand how it can be. It's this horrible mix of feelings. I am sorry for her and angry at her.
It's tough to process something like that. You're left juggling those conflicting feelings of anger and sadness. It's hard not to think about what could have been if you'd stayed close. You wanted the best for both of you, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. The numbness is a natural response. It's a lot to carry, really. Just remember, it's okay to feel all those things at once.
I don't recall ever thinking he was selfish. I knew he was struggling, and had been for years. It happened 22 years ago this month, and remains one of the single most defining moments of my life. I still miss him. He was like a brother to me. I saw the pain his family went through, and I tried to be the strong one they could rely on. I was in shock. I had dealt with depression of my own, and I swore that I would never put my loved ones through the same thing, but I didn't hate him for it. Seeing his family eventually got to be too painful. They had adopted me when I moved there to go to college, and they were my second home, but I just couldn't deal with the pain and wound up shutting them out for years. I still think about him nearly every day. Sorry for rambling. I'm normally a bit more coherent than this.
Losing a friend like that really changes you. It's tough dealing with the aftermath, especially when you were so close. His family must have been going through a lot, and it's understandable that you needed space after what happened. It's not easy to see reminders of someone you miss. Sometimes, shutting people out feels necessary, even if it's hard on everyone involved. Those memories linger without a way to heal.
My friend committed suicide because of a stupid mistake connected to being addicted to painkillers. He died at 34 and had a good job and lots of respect in his field. I do not feel like he was being selfish. I feel like he was being stupid. We had grown apart over the previous years, and I had not contacted him in about a year before he died. I still dream about him. I think about him never meeting my kids. I think about things that I can never share with him. In my dreams, he somehow faked his death and is not really dead. I still cannot go visit his parents. It is just very sad. It took a piece of me when he died.
I'm sorry to hear about your friend. It sounds really tough to deal with that kind of loss. Sometimes it feels like there's no way to understand why things happen, especially when you wish you could have been closer. It's normal to have those dreams and hopes that he's still out there somewhere. It's hard to face his family too. I'm sure they feel that loss deeply as well.
I wanted attention and to scream. When I went to his funeral, I felt like I didn't belong. I kept wanting to blame someone else. It couldn't have possibly been his fault. I have tried to get over it, and for the most part it works. I wrote a song about him. I still occasionally text his cell phone. Whenever I hear his name though, I want to cry, but I hold myself back. I'm a grown-ass man.
It sounds like you're processing a lot. It's tough to lose someone and feel that mix of emotions. Writing a song is a good outlet for those feelings. And texting his phone seems like a way to keep the connection alive, even if it's just for you. It's normal to want to cry sometimes, no matter how grown you are. Just take it one day at a time.
My brother killed himself when I was 15. It turned me into the man I am today. I started to strive to be like him, to take all of the advice he had given me as my older brother. It worked. I'm outgoing, I have lots of friends, I have an excellent life. However, I'm the most deeply angry person I have ever met. I'm always so angry that it feels like my insides are being eaten away. And that's because I can't forgive him. 14 years later, and I cannot forgive him for what he did to us.
It's tough when you lose someone close, especially a brother. Trying to live up to his memory can be heavy. On one hand, it's inspiring that you turned it into something positive. On the other, that anger must be really hard to carry after all these years. Learning to forgive, or at least let go, might help. It's a journey, and it takes time to sort through those feelings.
It is the product of some philosophies that one is faced with the simple question, is this a game I want to play? Do I stay, or do I go? It's not about being a bad sport, it's about basic interest and free will. Sometimes those factors culminate in an absolute, and it is important to not feel resentful. We share humanity, but not the same perspective of it.
I once had a friend who always questioned whether to stay in a situation or leave. It wasn't about wanting to quit but just feeling disconnected. We talked about it, and he realized it was okay to choose his own path. In the end, he accepted that everyone sees things differently, and that's fine. It's about finding what genuinely interests you and being true to yourself.
I started to type a long-ass story before I realized it might be better to get to the gist of it. It was a sense of loss, but part of me was glad. For him, but if I'm completely honest, also for myself. Depressed people are toxic, especially if you yourself have a history of depression. Went to his funeral, visited his grave once. Haven't really looked back since.
It's tough losing someone. You feel that weight of sadness, but also a strange relief, especially if their struggles affect you too. I get it. Sometimes distancing yourself is the best move for your own mental health. Funerals can feel like a closure of sorts, but it's that lingering feeling that can stick around. Life moves on, and sometimes you just have to keep going without looking back.
In retrospect, all the warning signs were there. He always had the mentality of pure and utter defeat. I figured it was a phase, as we were both about 20 years old, and he would eventually figure out what he wanted out of life. One foreshadow I missed was his infatuation with gore vids/pics. His desktop wallpaper was that of a severed head. I chalked it up to adolescent rebellion, perhaps. Sigh. I miss him. He had so much potential.
It's tough to see a friend struggle like that. Sometimes, the signs are clearer in hindsight. We think they'll grow out of certain phases, but they might need more support than we realize. The interest in darker things can be alarming, especially when it seems more serious than just rebellion. It's a reminder to check in on friends, even if it feels awkward. Losing someone to their inner battles is hard to process.
Lost a good friend to suicide back in November. I'm still really messed up from it. The grief is a little different with suicide. For me, it was much more anger and much more guilt than any other form of death. Anger, because how the fuck could you just leave us like this? Guilt, because I was blind to the warning signs. I know neither of these are how to look at it. I miss her so bad, and I'm not close to recovering from it. I don't talk about it much. I've been there before, but there's no closure for me. Her family says it's what she wanted and they respect that, but I don't think anyone ever really wants to die. It's just the only outlet they see at that time.
I'm really sorry to hear about your friend. Losing someone like that hits different, especially with all those mixed feelings of anger and guilt. It's tough to process. It's okay to not have closure though. Everyone grieves in their own way. Sometimes, just holding on to the memories can help, even if it doesn't feel like enough. Talking about it can also help, but it's understandable if you don't want to.
Person at work I worked with for over 5 years checked out. No signs, never depressed, always the positive one that got us pumped for a project no one wanted to work on. Then he was gone. It was a rude awakening to know people around me are losing their battles in life. I will always remember him, but don't understand why people do it. I have struggles but I will never give up or quit.
It's tough when someone you respect and admire suddenly isn't there anymore. You think you know someone, and then life throws you a curveball. His positivity masked what he was going through. It's a reminder that everyone has their own battles, even if they seem fine. I get that feeling of wanting to keep pushing through your own struggles. It's important to remember we can support each other.
His name was Steven. He was a kid with food allergies who had some behavior issues at times, and he was regarded as kind of a weird kid by a lot of people. He was into Transformers and chess. He was my friend, and he was a better friend to me than I was to him, I often think. I don't know that it was a suicide, but what was explained to me at the time makes me think that accidental was what it was called to make everyone feel better so that nobody had to think much about the fact that a 13-year-old boy died, alone and ignored. It's been the better part of 30 years, and I remember his funeral as though it happened yesterday.
That's a tough story. Steven sounds like he was a good friend, even if he had his struggles. Losing someone young really sticks with you. It's easy to overlook the quiet ones, but they often have a lot going on beneath the surface. His interests in Transformers and chess show he had his own unique world. I guess remembering him helps keep that part of his life alive.
My brother's friend killed himself a few years ago. It was pretty sad he was so young. I didn't even know him that well, and I was pretty shaken up. I remember going to the wake, being fine, and then just bawling when I got up to the casket. I cried more for him than I did for my grandfather, who died a few weeks later.
That's a heavy experience. It's tough how loss hits differently, especially when it's someone young. It's like you realize the fragility of life in those moments. Attending the wake must have felt surreal, and being caught off guard with emotions can surprise you. Grief has a way of surfacing unexpectedly, and sometimes it's the unknown that shocks us the most. Definitely a reminder to cherish those around us.
I lost a close friend to suicide years ago. When I found out, I didn't believe it. I thought it was a sick joke. It didn't really set in until I was standing over his body in the casket. A month before he died, he came to me and asked if I knew anyone that was giving away kittens, that he had been lonely and thought a buddy might help. I said I'd ask around, but I forgot about it. I've always thought if I had found him a kitten to take care of, he may still be here.
That's really tough. Losing a friend like that is something that stays with you. The idea that a simple act, like getting a kitten, could have made a difference is heavy. It's easy to think about what could have been done differently, but sometimes it's just hard to know. Those moments stick with you, and it's a reminder of the importance of reaching out and being there for friends.
It's surreal after it happens. 1 minute they're there, and the next they aren't. He was found in the shower by his girlfriend since they were living together. I can't imagine how much that affected her. But for me, I wasn't in daily contact with him, so I only felt sorrow. His last text to me, ironically, was "This year we'll kill it," talking about a test we were going to take. He was 26.
It's tough to process when someone suddenly isn't there anymore. The shock of losing a friend, especially in such a sudden way, leaves a heavy feeling. He had plans, like we all do, and it's hard to wrap your head around the finality of it. I didn't see him often, but those moments linger. That last message hit differently now, a reminder of what could have been. Life can really be unpredictable.
I met my boyfriend's mother's best friend maybe just 2 or 3 times. They were so close. My so referred to her as his aunt. She was the sweetest, friendliest, and seemingly happiest woman you would meet. I felt like she was my aunt from only the few times I met her. She had an extremely troubled path and had a hard time finding love. My so got the call minutes after I got a call from my mom telling me my uncle had pancreatic cancer. I'm not sure what was worse, She died just a few weeks before he did. I technically barely knew her, but felt like she was my best friend, but I still think about her a lot and how nothing can save people who really don't want to be here. It sucks, but I don't feel angry. I really think she's much happier now, and she'll be okay. Whatever the afterlife is or isn't. It's people like her, alive or not, who make the world a better place though. She made me feel like I mattered and made me laugh, and she just had this thing that made you love her instantly.
It's wild how someone can feel like family even when you've barely met. Those moments stick with you. Losing someone like that, especially when life is already throwing curveballs, is tough to process. It's clear she had a profound impact on your life, despite the short time. The way you remember her shows the good she brought and the love she shared, and that kind of legacy is something special.
It's been 8 years since I lost one of my best friends. The pain has transformed over time, and the grief presented itself in so many different ways. To be honest, the biggest struggle I face now is reconciling how so much of who and what I love in the present day and her existence seem to be mutually exclusive. It's nearly impossible to not attribute a domino effect of events leading from her death to the place I am now. It's hard to think of how much I wish I could share that with her, when I wonder how it would even be feasible. I try to tell myself she may not have been cut out for this life, and that while I certainly believe there is hope for everyone, that's not a belief I can impose on anyone else. No amount of persuasion would have changed that in her.
Losing a friend is tough. It really shapes how you see the world. Over time, you start realizing how everything you love today connects back to them but also feels separate. It's like there's this divide where you wish they could be part of your life now. I guess you just have to accept that not everyone can handle what life throws at them. It's a hard truth to face.
93 years old? Shit. I really can't blame the guy. Not only he had lost most of his friends and family, but I bet he also suffered from sort of physical pain. I have seen 60-year-olds who give up on life because they don't have anyone left and they have sort of painful disease that cannot be cured. It must take a lot of willpower just to keep going at that point. He had done his share of work and living, I guess. If someone like that thinks it's time, who are we to judge him?
Yeah, reaching that age is tough. Losing friends and family can really take a toll on someone. I've seen it too. People in their 60s just give up when they feel alone and in pain. It's a heavy thing to deal with. If someone who's been through so much thinks it's their time, it's hard to say anything against that. They probably carry a lot of weight on their shoulders.
I lost my step-grandpa to suicide in 1990. However, I did not know it was a suicide for 20 years. My uncle slipped up and told me. My parents told me his heart stopped in his sleep. Now it makes sense. My grandpa had lost his first wife to illness and his daughter to suicide. Now he was going to lose my grandma to cancer. But we had no warning signs. The whole family was down because it looked like my grandma wasn't going to beat cancer this time, but nothing weird or out of the ordinary.
That's a tough story. It's surprising how families can hide the truth about stuff like this. It makes you think about how people cope with grief. You had no idea for so long. Losing someone is hard, and with all that pressure, it's understandable why he felt that way. It's just a reminder that we never really know what others are going through, even when it seems normal on the outside.
This sounds similar to my great-grandfather. His wife passed about 8 years before he did, and a daughter the year after her. He didn't commit suicide, but we knew when he was going to go, and he did too. He spent his last hours talking about going to see Mama again and singing, "I'm going to heaven," over and over. His death is probably the only one I'm relieved happened. He was miserable his last few years, physically deteriorating and very lonely. It was okay to see he was no longer suffering.
It's tough to watch someone you care about suffer like that. My uncle went through something similar. He lost his partner, and it really changed him. He talked a lot about reuniting, too. It was sad but somehow comforting at the end. When he finally passed, it felt like a relief because he had been in so much pain. Sometimes, seeing someone free from suffering brings a bit of peace.
I lost my brother this past Christmas Eve. I have random bouts of sadness. I feel uncomfortable when I see depictions of suicide attempts on TV/ in movies, but for the most part I'm put together. Lots of my family members are experiencing survivor's guilt and anger directed. At first him, and then his fiancée, mostly as an attempt to place blame on something, putting off the acceptance.
I'm sorry to hear that. It's tough to handle loss. Emotions can be all over the place. It's normal to feel uncomfortable with certain scenes in media after something like this. Families often look for someone to blame during grief. It can take time for everyone to process, and that's okay. Just remember to take care of yourself and allow yourself to feel what you need to feel.
They say it's exceptionally hard for survivors who are the ones to find their dead loved one. Of course it is. No one deserves that kind of pain. If I was the one to find my friend, I don't think I'd be able to move on without a lot of help. It will get better. There are a lot of places to go for help. Survivors of suicide groups or literature may help along with therapy. The sooner you go to therapy, the sooner you can allow the wound to properly heal.
It's tough to think about finding a loved one like that. I can't imagine the weight that would carry. Once, a friend of mine lost someone and it hit hard. They took their time to heal, went to a support group, and slowly found a way to cope. It's important to talk about it and get that help when needed. Everyone deserves to heal, even if it feels impossible at first.
I know I probably can't say anything that would make you feel like you didn't do enough, but you were a good friend to him. Sometimes that just isn't enough anyway. You can never know how a person is really feeling, and even people with a perfect support network around them can end up in the darkest place. It is never on one person to save someone else. Do you really think that you could have done enough on your own with how shitty those people were? That teacher has a lot more to feel guilty for, and those scumbags. You were a friend to him. You probably stopped him doing what he did sooner, but you can't blame yourself that in the end it got too much for him.
It's tough to hear when someone struggles, even if you feel you're doing your best. I had a friend who went through a rough patch, and I often wondered if I could have done more. But the truth is, you can only be there for someone as much as they let you. Sometimes, it's just not enough, and there's no point in carrying that weight alone. It's complicated.
My girlfriend took her life in September 2013. It sucks to hell and back, but if there is one thing I can recommend that has worked for me is to stop looking for her in other people. I know I would never find her. She was wonderful in a way only she could be. And for me to look for that in another person is unfair for everyone involved. I have learned to enjoy others for who they are rather than for who they are not. Your girlfriend is irreplaceable, but that doesn't mean you cannot experience another person who is incredible and wonderful and who will make you feel alive again. I think of her now as I would of a friend. What would she think of this girl that I like? What would she think of the way I act now? Would she be proud of me? In that sense, my girlfriend never left. She is still very much here with me, even if it's not in body.
That's a heavy story, but it has a clear message. Losing someone you love is tough, and it really changes how you view relationships. The idea of not searching for that one person in others makes sense. It's about appreciating people for who they are. Keeping her memory alive through reflection is a nice way to honor her. It's a reminder that love doesn't vanish, it shifts into something different.
You have all the memories that you should be thankful for. Think about all the times you saw her smile because of you. Times when she was at her happiest. And keep those thoughts in your head. Don't dwell on the negative, because it's not going to bring them back. You'll both be alive as long as you keep thinking about her smile.
It's interesting how memories can shape us. I remember a friend who always had this smile that could light up a room. Whenever we hung out, we'd joke around and I'd see that joy on her face. After she moved away, I realized that holding on to those good moments was a way to keep her spirit alive. It's a reminder that positivity can linger, even if people change.
I've been depressed for a long time, and the only thing that kept me from taking my life is the idea of how much pain it would bring my family and friends. Thanks for reminding me what the struggle is all about. I'll live to fight another day with this in mind, and maybe I'll eventually feel less depressed as I keep living and experiencing new things.
It's really tough dealing with those feelings. It's good you found a reason to keep going, thinking about how others would react. Life can change in unexpected ways when you keep pushing through. Experiencing new things might help bring some relief too. Just take it day by day. You're not alone in this.
Thanks for sharing your story. It puts things into perspective for us all. I feel for you. Losing a loved one suddenly is never easy. In my life, I've received a lot of calls about death, but they were always for ones I'd expected, such as grandparents who were sick. Didn't make it any less painful, but there wasn't that immediate shock. But the biggest shock came from a death of a close friend. I lost a friend in 2011 who died suddenly from a pulmonary embolism as a result of bed rest for pneumonia, and that was without any warning. He was one of my best friends, a co-worker, and a great human being. One of the best. He died at 9 a.m., and our boss broke us the news. I'd never heard a hush go so quickly across a group of people. Some said his name quietly, others sat and stared, some left work entirely. The shock makes you feel like you're behind a camera witnessing something tragic in a movie. You completely disconnect and reseed into your body. It's scary and surreal.
Losing a friend like that is tough. I know the feeling of shock when you hear news like that, especially someone close. It feels unreal, like you're just watching it happen instead of being part of it. You experience this fog around you. I had a similar moment when I got news about a friend's sudden passing years back. It just hits hard, and you're left with memories and a quiet void.
I've lost quite a few as well. No warning signs either. When I look back, I can see the small signs, but I still can't understand it. / the one that hit me the most is a girl I used to have a crush on, but some of my friends didn't like her, so I stopped hanging out with her. Apparently, she also had a crush on me. Said I was the first guy to ever treat her right. / I didn't see her for about 6 months, then I learned of her death. I thought to myself, what if I had shown to her I did like her? Time goes by. I don't blame myself, but I do get that nagging what if.
It's tough when connections fade unexpectedly. I had a similar experience with someone I cared about. We drifted apart, and then I heard they had serious struggles. Like you said, it's hard not to think about what could have been if things were different. Sometimes, it just feels like timing is everything, and even if you don't blame yourself, those lingering thoughts can stick with you for a while.
I'm so sorry for your loss. You shouldn't blame yourself, though. It's not your fault for not seeing signs. I tried to end my life last year when I was 17, however, nobody knew what was going on in my head. Every day, I'd be the happiest person to hide my true emotions. I never spoke to anybody as I felt I would just be a bother. I'd always help all my friends out with their problems whilst they were oblivious I had any of my own. When my mom caught me, she broke down. She was angry at herself for not seeing signs and couldn't stop blaming herself. The same thing happened with my friends. The thing that hurt the most was knowing that they all felt it was their fault when it really wasn't. So please, as difficult as it is, you really shouldn't blame yourself. Signs are never as obvious as people think. If you ever need to talk, PM me, and I'll try and help you as much as I can.
It's tough to carry that weight alone. I remember a friend who always smiled, but inside was struggling like you. It was a shock when we found out. Everyone felt guilty for not noticing the signs. It's a reminder that sometimes, the most cheerful faces hide the deepest pain. Encouraging open conversations can make a difference. It's important to reach out, as hard as it might be. Taking that step can really help.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.